I'm Dave March, and this is the Land of Confusion show, and this is my co-host, Don.
Hi, Don Tillman here.
And Don's hiding out in his backyard, where I wish I had a backyard to hide out in.
Well, welcome to my back porch.
Mm-hmm. And
we got redwoods. We got redwoods.
And we are here talking to Sisyphus. Sorry, what is it?
Sisyphus.
Sisyphus. And Z laughing. I got yourself a Z behind me.
Yes, Z laughing.
Same one.
Thing.
Oh. I didn't know you were this. Come to think of it, I never seen them together.
No,
like the Pokeroo.
Yeah. Apparently he said something nice about Winnie the Pooh once, and ever since then the political artists couldn't lay off.
Oh, sure. Well, sure.
Okay, so well, we have their standard questions we start off with. So where were you born, and what was it like growing up there?
Questions. We have questions.
Indeed. I was born in D.C., raised in the Maryland suburbs. It was topical, very topical. High school I gained a reputation as being able to turn moral outrage on its head on a dime. And so I spent most of my high school career in the hallways having people come up to me and try to hit me with white guilt or imperialist guilt or any of the rest of it. And I would explain to them that they were just milking the victimhood of poor blacks or whatever. So that was how I became incredibly unpopular in school.
Yeah, I'm going to guess it was really hard growing up with your fellow obvious millennials, right?
Millennials? No. I'm an Xer.
Okay, same here.
I get those confused. I don't know. I just which is the Xers?
No. I grew up. I was in high school for Carter.
Oh wow. Okay.
Which was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I was seeing the daughter of a Washington Post writer when Nixon resigned in '74. So,
all right.
But he was a foreign affairs writer, so it wasn't his fault.
Oh, okay.
So the Carter. Oh, that was the malaise years. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
There was that malaise index.
Yes.
Am I remembering that correctly?
Oh, you got it. We had double-digit inflation and double-digit unemployment at the same time, which meant that the wags kept showing up and saying, "No, that's not possible. Sorry, whatever you're experiencing, that can't be it because it's not possible." Keynesian economics, the animal spirits guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was actually several issues there, right? One is that the fact that you have a malaise index alone is a really bad sign. But also,
it was a stagflation index.
Yeah.
The malaise index was, I think, something that the rest of
it was a metric of some sort that they used.
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be you added these two percentages or something, and you got what they ended up calling the stagflation index.
And also you mentioned this, there was this trend in economics, and I don't know how much it's still in macroeconomics, right? Where you just say that historically this has happened when this has happened. Therefore, we'll just assume that there's a law that's true for all time.
Yeah.
Right. And so for example, that you can't have high inflation and high interest rates at the same time, sort of thing.
Well, they did it.
It was groundbreaking times. We went to the moon and we invented stagflation all within a decade. It was genius, pure genius. But we also first U.S. military defeat, at least according to the way we were scoring it at the time.
Yeah.
So.
A military defeat because your Congress basically abandoned the South Vietnamese.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And when I got out in the world, I did a lot of military contracts, and those were some interesting conversations. So, you know, the Tet Offensive being a loss, for example. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, that's good for 3 or 4 hours right there.
Yeah. No, the Tet, unfortunately, it was a propaganda failure, but not a military failure. The South Vietnamese army, or whatever they were, the VC there down in South Vietnam, are all destroyed pretty much, and it just became a North Vietnamese show from there on out.
Yeah. The Walter Cronkite midlife crisis played out on the air had something to do with it too.
Mm-hmm.
he just sort of conflated his personal issues with what the United States was doing in Vietnam. And so we were all disappointing, you know.
Mm-hmm. So my next question for you is like, normally we ask you, how did you become a conservative? When did you realize you weren't like the other kids? And it sounds like you realized really early on.
Well, I started out as a critic. I found it very easy to disapprove. And so I wasn't anything in particular, but I disapproved of everything and had a good reason for it. Like I said, I could invent a rationale on a dime. So I got a hold of Thomas Sowell's book on high school, which is the absolute worst time to read it, because I had this stack of what I disapproved of, and most of that stack was high school. Yes, parents had their own space in there, but it was mostly high school. Mm-hmm. And then I found Thomas Sowell's book and found out about the German industrial roots and all this other wonderfulness about treating schools like factories. And so, you know, I added my little pile to his big pile, and suddenly statism was in the crosshairs, big time. It was easy to get a somewhat libertarian binge if you really paid attention to what was going on in DC. But actually having, you know, a whole book of Thomas Sowell's scholarship to back it up. Yeah, they're doing it all wrong. Yeah, they're just trying to be too organized and not enough subsidiarity and, you know, all that stuff.
Well, so you got into Thomas Sowell really early then.
Well, that was the only book of his I read. The other time I would see him on the bookshelf. At first, he wasn't easy to run across.
Right.
I was a bookstore guy. I would go into bookstores and find something that looked interesting. And Thomas Sowell made the list because he was talking about secondary schools. And it was somewhere on the title or the tag or something. And said, okay, I got to read this. And he just lit up all the lights. So I was already reading Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller and all that.
I love Vonnegut.
You know, I was listening to Bob Dylan and you know, so this was my next step. This was just waiting to happen. You know, I was destined.
A short thing, since you mentioned Vonnegut, I just got to say, around that time, they made a TV movie of, well, it was called Between Time and Timbuktu. Okay. And he wrote it. It was basically a mix of some of the short stories all mixed together. And it was made, I think the Boston Public TV station funded it. And it was a TV movie kind of thing. And you can find it on YouTube. The quality is terrible, but it's so worth it. It's so good. It's a story of a shot into a space shot. And they want to find not just any astronaut, they want to find an astronaut who could describe the experience really well. So they said, well, it requires a poet. So they had a poetry contest, and the winner of the poetry contest got to be shot into space. And this is his story. And it's hilarious, and it's wonderfully done, low budget sci-fi. And it's a delight. You can find it on YouTube. It's called Between Time and Timbuktu. And I just think it's great.
Okay, so we'll stop
my
now,
little
and I'll come back when I'm done. Yeah.
On Vonnegut.
Exactly.
I love Vonnegut.
Did you ever watch the it was the HBO Harrison Bergeron movie?
I did not. Harrison Bergeron is included into this the space thing.
They did a bit more like a realistic version of it. Basically, the revolution has happened. They're using a chemical substance to keep most of the people dumb, but there's a few and then there's like an organization that's like kind of secret masters who are running the revolution who can get off the drug, and then Harrison's rebellion is he discovers there's real art in the world, and he exposes it to the rest of the people.
Oh, sweet. So yeah, I love Vonnegut.
Yeah.
Sorry to sidetrack you like that, but I couldn't help
it. All I did was I saw Slaughterhouse 5 once, and all I remember about it was the book was much better. The book was so much better.
Kind of like watching Catch-22 and then going and reading it.
Well, the book is so well written. I mean, and it's got that wonderful first line, right? The very first line is, all this happened more or less. I just love that.
And like our show, this all happened more or less.
More or less, yeah. Because part of it was, derived from his earlier days in the army, and part of the stuff about time travel was kind of made up. So yeah.
I hope so.
True confessions of an author. There we go.
Yeah.
But no, I grew up reading science fiction. So in 7th grade, I'm not on 7th grade, in 2nd grade at 7 years old, the fall, I went in for my first free library time, found all the Heinlein juveniles and knocked them out in 6 weeks. And I haven't had the same kind of epiphany since. So that was delightful. I learned all about relativity from Time for the Stars, and radiation, hiding from radiation, and shielding from Podcane of Mars. Good times.
Yeah.
I always had some difficulty with most science fiction. I thought there are these the plot lines and the plot devices kept being used over and over. I had probably like 15 plot devices that just get recycled so many times. Oh, it's a wormhole through space. Look at that, And I just see that a lot with science fiction. It's rare you get beyond the cliches.
You want to get beyond the cliches, you should. I'm trying to remember his name. There's a science fiction writer who was an engineer, and he did great work. I'll try it.
That's a lot of them, but including Heinlein. But okay.
Yeah. No, it's just another one. He's also a conservative and a skeptic, and I just can't remember his name off the top of my head, but it'll come to
Steele?
me. Was that?
You thinking of Steele?
No, I'm like, God.
Alan Steele, yeah.
Yeah, Alan Steele is another person, but it's not. I know it's not Alan Steele. It's another guy. He got into this particular writer got into anti-evolution theory, or being a very critic of it. I think he still believed there was something more going on, but he got into being very critical. He's like, wait, natural selection? This doesn't make any sense. We're not doing this. Like,
are we talking about
all your
Hogan?
evidence is this is like one group. It was very interesting to read.
Are we talking about Paul Hogan?
Maybe it might have been Paul Hogan.
He's a Scottish fellow. He was very contrarian.
Yes. I think
Probably still is.
Yeah, I think he might have passed away.
My favorite of his was he did a book about being plugged into the net. Everybody is plugged into the net, and America goes incommunicado. And when they finally get a survey put together to go in and discover what happened, everybody is plugged into their computer and dead because something hit the net that totally mesmerized all of them and into a virtual reality. And they didn't know they were in a virtual reality, so they all starved to death.
Was it porn?
No, this is like no.
No, it's James P. Hogan.
He did things like the
That's his
Giants of Ganymede, and you know, the thing about the Giants of Ganymede is that humans actually evolved on Ganymede, and so we weren't part of the regular process as assumed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is James P. Hogan. So that's who I was thinking of. Yeah, he's
okay. James P. Hogan. I said Paul.
Yeah, Paul Hogan's the Australian Crocodile Dundee.
Guy with a knife.
He's got a heck of a knife. Knife. That's no knife. This is a knife.
Do you consider yourself a conservative or a classic liberal or a libertarian or?
Most of my life, I've called myself a libertarian.
Okay.
As I've moved closer to the religious bent, I find that to be hugely irresponsible in places. So it's been tempered pretty much. But my original idea was that the religious should go libertarian because it gave them the freedom to be virtuous. And then I came around to, no, they're not going to give you the freedom to be virtuous because sin wants you in their bucket. Now, mind you, with cancel culture and all of that, I see that virtue has prevailed. So it's so much better. But it's an odd journey.
Yeah, I'm personally conservative. I cannot. There are certain parts of libertarianism I just cannot wrap my head around, or not wrap my head around. It's just like the world has to be a perfect place for that your belief to happen. We do not live in that world yet. Maybe one day we'll live in that world, but where the non-aggression principles and all that stuff can work. But I mean, there are still evil people out to get us, and they are going to come for us whether we hole up in our country or not. And like some of these libertarians are like, oh, if we just leave these people alone, they'll leave us alone. I'm like, no, that's not how these people think.
Right. It worked so well at Chaz.
Yeah.
I love Seattle. They're proving everything I've always said about them.
Actually, sis, where are you right now?
I am in Williamsburg, Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Grew up and worked in DC most of my life. As things decoupled and that sort of thing. I made this my next phase. I like the small town. I like, people who smile at you and say bless you as opposed to some of the things they say to you in DC. And I like I've had the experience of being steamrollered by a march more than once, living in DC, and it just doesn't happen here.
Yeah.
You're not at risk. It's not going to.
So how far from DC are you?
I'm about 2.5 hours from DC.
Okay.
Oh
yeah, a healthy distance. Yeah.
And about 45 minutes from Richmond.
Okay.
So I watch Richmond a little more closely now than I watch DC, because they've had their round of riots, but they don't seem to be having the continuous every night riot thing going. They seem to get up for it once every week or two. So it's not the same level of mania. And
we all hear about the Portland and Seattle riots, but we never hear about any of the other riots. I talked to some people in Florida, and they were telling me about riots happening in Tampa and Miami, and I'm like, I didn't even hear of these things.
Yeah, it's the thing I saw in tracking Seattle and Portland and Minneapolis. What I found was events are showing up in some of the local press, not the papers so much as the television stations, the evening news, but they're not getting picked up nationally, and where they're pretending that none of this stuff ever happens. And of course, some of the local outlets are better about it than others. So the coverage is all over the board.
That's interesting. Because I thought this logical conundrum here, right? The riots were supposed to be good for Dems or something, right? That's why the mayors of these cities had a policy of the police hands off and let them go nuts. But now, if it's not publicized, what good is it? I mean, this is like a lose-lose. If it's not publicized as energy and anger, and nothing's done about it, that's a lose-lose for them, right?
Well, the
I mean,
riots.
you want one or the other, right?
No, you're right. You're right. but watch how it develops, because on the 30th of May, riots pop up, and Democratic polls start to drop. So they decide that the story will be that Trump is occupying the nation militarily. So they keep the riots going, and they are. I mean, it's burn down all the buildings you like. We'll arrest 3 guys, and they'll be out in 2 hours, and you guys just party on every night. And the idea is that all these businesses are going to complain to Trump, and Trump's going to send the troops. And they were all set. They had their narrative all set, as you could see. Right. When Trump sent, Nancy Pelosi, she's still reading from last month's script. So, Trump sends 100 federal officers to help protect Hatfield, and Nancy's talking about Trump stormtroopers all over the country suppressing Democrat cities. So you know what the script is, because she can't remember more than one script at a time, and she's probably not, reciting the one she was supposed to be reciting.
Right. So that was the plan, right? To have all this anger and dissent and riots, and then have Trump's response, the stormtroopers, look really bad for Trump. Is that and the fact that they have riots going on during the Trump administration. Those two things is what they originally wanted, I believe.
Right.
Yeah. The riots and the response.
The never Trump narrative is now that Trump can't make the riots an issue and pin it on Biden, because they're under Trump's presidency, not Biden's presidency. Totally ignoring that it's under blue governors that all this rioting is going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I hardly pay attention to many never Trumpers anymore. Just turn it off. But
so this is what's also interesting is that we had like race riots during the Obama administration. We had them in St. Louis, in Baltimore, in Brooklyn, in Manhattan, in Minneapolis, in Milwaukee, San Francisco, Oakland, LA, San Diego. We had all those race riots. Dallas, I think, Ferguson, Baltimore again. So we had all those during the Obama administration, and those were pretty bad. Here it's all just waiting to this very moment here, when they pulled off this synchronized multiple riots at once.
Right.
And
kept them going.
And he kept them going with the permission of the mayors of these cities and the police departments.
Now, tacit permission.
Tacit. Well, yeah.
You got to remember they spent the last how many years moving out the guys who would prevent them, the police chiefs and other people who would prevent them from doing this, and replacing them with political hacks. So the rank and file cops would probably be more than willing to do things, but their commanding officers are not. They're political flunkies. They don't know.
Right. Or whether they do or not, they're following orders from the mayor. So so that's all very clear. So apparently, I'm just thinking here that maybe it's failed in two ways. In that they didn't get the Trump stormtrooper response, and they didn't get any sympathy.
Right.
And looks really bad. Looks really bad.
they've gotten a little traction with the narrative of peaceful protesters from the viewpoint of a lot of people have or continue to participate in daytime protesting where it's not turning violent.
Yeah.
And then saying that, oh, those are the people those are the events that Trump is calling riots.
Right.
You know, that's free speech, and he's trying to suppress free speech. What they want is to burn down the courthouse.
Right. And the Chicago Police Department has this amazing drone footage of the quote unquote peaceful protesters.
Oh yes.
Changing clothes, putting on the black clothes, and rallying the weapons, and also the signs were on PVC pipe, and they were sharpened points, and so they use those as weapons. And they have Chicago Police Department has this amazing drone footage of this. I'll have to find it and pop it in later or something. But yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Do that. I want to see that. I've seen things like that, but it sounds like they've got a lot of pieces of it in one place on this one.
Yeah. Pretty crazy. What were we talking about?
Riots, apparently.
Have we drifted?
He started off at how he became, whether he thought he was a conservative or libertarian. We can get back to one of the other things. Why did you join Ricochet?
I always say Ricochet joined me. Mm-hmm. I was reading Thomas Sowell in the 70s. I was reading Epstein in the 80s. I was following Uncommon Knowledge and National Review in the 90s. And Ricochet came along, and they kind of joined me in that neighborhood. So my dream job is Peter Robinson's Uncommon Knowledge job. I'm a software architect, which means that I've had my fingers in every fruit of software development, database, coding, objects, networking, all of that stuff. And so I can put together an overall design and hold the specialists to to a correct standard. And so I'm a generalist. As Heinlein said, specialization is for ants. And so I took that to heart very young. I like to learn everything about everything. I'm a compulsive reader. And so here is Peter Robinson talking to Thomas Sowell about everything.
Yeah.
Talking to Milton Friedman about everything. Talking to Epstein about everything. He's talking to all the people I love, and he's got the wide open spaces. And that was, I hate him because I wouldn't be able to earn his job, but but it's not fair that somebody else should have it.
Oh, we all hate him.
Growing up in DC, one of the things you notice we had, well, first of all, I had the experience of having a riot break out between where I was living when I was 8 and where my father was working. And so I knew blacks. I had friends who were blacks. I didn't understand this. This made no sense to me. And then I slowly came around, and at 8, I became an anti-racist on the grounds that, okay, if they can do that to them, they can do it to me. And that's unacceptable.
Anti-racist. So you joined Anti-Ra.
No. This was what's now called anti-racist is black supremacy. That's a completely different movement. It's been misnamed in order to confuse and confound. But, I believe in all lives matter, and I believe in anti-racism, which has nothing to do with black supremacy or anybody else's supremacy. Racist supremacy is all of it demonic, period, end of topic. So I had the flyers I would get on the bus to go to the museum or go visit my mom at work or whatever. And there would be Farrakhan flyers next to the Nazi flyers, next to the, you know, I mean, the thing was littered with, you know, these are the oppressed peoples on the bus, so we have to get this literature out there. And the oppressed peoples, we're leaving them pretty much where they belonged, underneath the chairs on the floor where nobody would have to look at them. So I would get on the bus, you know, after the morning rush, and it would be full of this stuff. And that's usually where I found all that. I couldn't find it anywhere else.
I've thought about starting some sort of organization called Cute Puppies Forever. And the stated goal of this organization will be the lockdowns of millions of liberals and just into re-education camps and all that stuff. And then they say they're against them. Like, you're going to be against cute puppies forever? Like, are you against that? That's really what...
I think we can get the Cute Puppy Act passed just as soon as the new Republican Congress rolls in.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
Yep. And then it's just, if anyone goes, you're against cute puppies? I don't understand this.
I had a similar idea for starting a company and calling it the Profitable Company. Whether you lose money or not.
It'll make great stock opening, right?
It's called the Profitable Company.
Yeah. What do we specialize in? Making money. Yeah.
So what do you like most about Ricochet?
What do I like most about Ricochet? As a generalist, if I say something stupid, somebody who knows much better than I do will correct me.
Oh, what I do now.
See, there it is. There it is. And sometimes they're even right. So, you know, but especially with the COVID thing, having actual doctors and immunologists and such weigh in online has been tremendous. Awesome. And sometimes I'm not remembering as well as I think I do. So, you know, if I talk about, never mind. I forget now.
Well, maybe we can get into a little bit of your background here. I'm fascinated. You were here working, you were in the ops center for the Challenger disaster? Oh.
No. I was in the TDRS Flight Ops Center.
Okay.
For the satellite, there was a TDRS satellite was the payload.
Okay.
For the Challenger. Okay. And the ops center for that was in White Sands, New Mexico.
Okay.
There was a technician who was on maternity leave. And I had come out, and they needed somebody to support the launch. So they had me come out from DC and train up on her job and be in position to do it. So I got to be there. We were all in a huge conference room that with a massive television screen, about 20 feet tall. And there were no chairs left by the time I got there. So I ended up standing next to Commander Scooby's next door neighbor. He was on his way to, he was doing a road trip from his home in Houston to Edwards Air Force Base in California. And he stopped off at White Sands because it was the right time on his path to catch the launch. And we had the big screen. And it's NASA buddies doing things for NASA buddies, you know, the old system. And so we're watching this thing go up and it goes sideways. And so all the jobs of everybody in this facility had been on ice for 2 years waiting for this thing to go up. And it had been delayed and delayed and delayed. So they finally put it, so they're finally there, they're finally putting it up, and you could hear a pin drop. You know, they started archiving the data for investigation and all those things. And otherwise, the place emptied out in about half an hour.
Yeah.
Everybody was just stunned. They didn't know if they were going to have a job the next week. And of course, the worst case was the guy standing next to me who just lost his next door neighbor.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that one had a personal impact. That was strange. Also in O'Fallon, Illinois, for the for 9/11. Now, not everybody knows the name O'Fallon, Illinois. A few more people know the name Scott Air Force Base, but it's the logistics hub for the Air Force in and out for any supplies that you need to send anywhere that need to get there quick, that have air orders in the continental United States, are going to get shipped to Scott Air Force Base and then sent overseas or sent wherever. So by the time I got home from work on 9/11, there was a 6-mile line of tractor trailer trucks, and there were trains running behind my motel every 15 minutes. I didn't even notice the railroad tracks at the motel. I'd been commuting there for TDY for about a month and hadn't even noticed that there were railroad tracks back there. And suddenly it's trains all day, all night, forever. There's, and there's snipers in the trees, and, it was just night and day. I went from a sleepy Midwestern utopia to, hi, we're going somewhere with a lot of stuff, and we'll let you know where soon. My sister, I called my sister. She was in Manhattan at the time, living in Manhattan. And I called her to tell her to keep her head down. But I was too late. She was already on the roof watching because it was 2 miles south of her.
No, man. 2 miles.
So she had the binoculars, and she made a day of it. And I'm like, okay, what's the next attack going to be? And what's she going to get herself into? Because nobody knew what was happening,
Right.
and what the next play was going to be. And of course, we found out a few months later that W had chosen that moment to open all of the silos to the nuclear arsenal for the ICBMs, just in case anybody was feeling disrespectful. And so everybody from top to bottom was absolutely flabbergasted.
Yeah. I remember, I have a friend, she just recently got her Canadian citizenship, but she told me on the day, she's at the time she's now born again Christian, so she's very different than when I met her, but she was very liberal, very enthusiastic on that. But when that day happened, she was just like, she told me, like, I said, we just have to go kill all these people. Let's just break out everything and just go kill all the people. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, the OG, we haven't hugged these people enough people kind of disappeared for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were really quiet, if not completely extinct. It took them about a day and a half. I was listening to the local news in O'Fallon. It took them about a day and a half to get to a woman who says, I don't care about those people over there. And she's talking about New York. She's not talking about, Iraq or Iran or no. She's talking about New York. I don't care about those people over there. What's the big fuss? It's.
You also mentioned that you were at the office of the State Department when the Secret Service set up a tent across the street with Bill Clinton. So that was a frequent occurrence, apparently.
He did that like 5 or 6 times while I was there. He was able to, with zero risk, stand in front of a crowd, and all of his applause lines would be applauded because there's 4,000 some odd. The State Department has more political appointees than the entire rest of the federal government. And it makes sense once you start thinking about ambassadors. and just how political and how foreign policy is dominated by the executive branch. It starts to make a lot of sense. What it meant that you could put 2,000 people in this auditorium and they all owed Bill Clinton something, and they were going to cheer like he was the second coming of Abraham Lincoln. It was just going to happen. So that was during the whole Monica Lewinsky thing. And, but it was like, why are they putting a tent in the middle of the street? And I kind of edged over. The owner, I didn't have the window office, but the person who did have the window office wasn't in the office. So I kind of eased over and I saw the cars. They had 3 cars come in and stop, and they were all inside this tent, just to give you a sense of the size.
Wow.
And they ran, and the tent had a tunnel, a canvas tunnel that ran all the way back inside the door and about 10 feet in past the door. So definitely nobody was going to take another shot like Hinckley did with Reagan transferring to a car.
Yeah.
So,
or I always loved the one with Ford, when the guy takes a shot at Ford, and everyone, he is getting into his car. He's got his 2 Secret Service, and they all just stop and look around at each other, and then the Secret Service are like, oh crap, and throw him in the back of the car. But there's like a good 3 seconds where you could have just shot Ford right in the head, and no, it would have been like no better time.
It's that reaction moment that's where they're always the most vulnerable. That's like, just the human condition. The good news is that the shooter has to react too.
Yeah.
So.
I saw Ford speak at a, well, it's way back when, at a bicentennial event, and they sent Secret Service people around to weld the manhole covers shut. This was outdoors.
Yep.
And I thought that was very strange. I'd never heard of that before, right?
And they sometimes forget to go around and unsolder them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's we saw a lot of that sort of thing in DC. And occasionally I would run across a manhole cover that was soldered shut and go, okay, that's genius. That's really useful. Whose idea was that? And then I found out about Secret Service antics. So
yeah.
So I guess that happens a lot.
You know, we also had the Metro system where the CIA were experimenting with LSD.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, it sort of explains a lot about the local culture.
Yeah. I just remember people were saying, well, you can't say about the virus and COVID or Wuhan flu or whatever. You can't say these things about it. The government would never do that. I'm like, the government did all this crazy shit in the 70s. Just go ask those poor black guys in Tuskegee or the MK Ultra experiments or all this stuff. I'm like, you don't think they might want us all to wear masks because that's part of some well, not sinister, but some sort of psychological plan. They want to see how we'll react.
Go do a survey of business owners in Seattle and Portland and New York and Chicago and LA, and you know, they'll have all sorts of stories for you too about who got hit and who didn't, who got bypassed, and how that was probably decided.
Well, I understand that if you do put up some sort of thing in your like there's a sticker you put up in your riot when you're near the riots, and they will say, oh, so the guy's got the sign, so we know.
Yeah, a BLM sign.
Yeah.
That hasn't always worked.
It's not working right now.
Right.
My favorite interviews are the business owners that I put the sign up. I put the sign
everything.
And 3 days after Amazon went with the whole banner, Black Lives Matter, anti-racist books, we're in lockstep with, they burned down, I think it was in Kansas City, they burned down one of their warehouses. So, you know, the rewards are fleeting and not necessarily consistent.
Yeah. Yeah, well, once you're in that mode of the riot, it doesn't matter. If something's in your way, you're going to hit it.
Well, not everybody's on the same side either.
True.
The thing about a riot is it's not exactly fine control. We had the mayor of Richmond complaining about he discovered white supremacists pretending to be BLM in the crowd.
Oh boy.
And so, you know, I can see which ones he's going to want to prosecute. Black mayor in a, you know, trying to, the mayor has been linear about condemning Antifa. He really has nothing good to say about Antifa, finds excuses. They're just bringing this stuff into my neighborhoods. I don't want to have anything to do with them. But for BLM, he says, oh, and there's these white supremacists that are coming in and pretending to be
I remember
BLM.
hearing about that.
And it's better than that, because the interview goes on where he's talking about how they're telling the black BLM what to do. And it's funny because, yeah, that's been happening in all the riots. And those are the hardcore communist trainees.
Yeah.
That are
Yeah, I was going to say, Alinsky recommends that. That's Alinsky noted that.
Well, I'm fairly convinced that parts of Antifa are being like packed by our friend over here, and all those little Chinese communist centers that are on all the university campuses. They're doing a bit more than just doing a cultural training and recruiting scientists. I think they're pretty well recruiting like anarchist people, communist vanguard. Why wouldn't they? If they're not, I'm severely disappointed in them, because if I were in their shoes, I'd be doing it.
Yeah, sure.
I started to dig down on all that stuff, and at some point I did this huge post where I pulled out the juiciest stuff from 4 different major sources that were talking about thousands of connections between all this, including the CCP, and how they play together. And there's this whole ecosystem. There's no question that G is pushing stuff at it, but because money is fungible, and because you have literally thousands of organizations doing this, it's hard to pin any particular action on a particular contributor.
Yeah.
And so Amazon and Facebook and Google don't have to be worried about being prosecuted for aiding and abetting felonies, because they only put in $10 million a piece, and there were all these other sources of money. And besides, the press was telling them that these were legitimate organizations. So where's the problem?
And one last piece from your thing. And then I read here that you were at the Army HQ for an active shooter incident.
Oh, that was fun.
Yeah.
I had been in, you know, a lot of I'd been in a lot of places that I thought were hotter. But here I am in Crystal City at Pentagon Annex with Army HQ. And I never had more work getting in and out of a building than with this one, because the security was so tight. And because the metal detector was set to be so sensitive.
Set to paperclip.
I had to take my shoes off because the rings for your shoelace, you know how they put a ring in the hole, so the hole doesn't
those
wear
rings
on your shoe, and those are
There's a name for that.
Yeah, and if I cared, I'd share it, but I don't, so I can't.
Emulate or something like that? Anyway.
So that was, and it was a shelter in place. So it was, there's a story, because we had the normal door for going in and out, and there was the back door, and the back door was supposed to be closed and deadlocked, and everything was supposed to go through the front door, and you needed to have a pass key to get in the front door. And but the back door, people would throw the lock and wedge it open, so that they could sneak out without going past the commander's office in the evening.
Okay.
And so suddenly 5 guys back there get up, jump up when the alert goes out, get up, jump up, and fix that door so that it's closed tight. That was good. And we found out later it was some guy who had been fired the previous week, managed to get a gun past security, fired off a couple of shots, but didn't end up hitting anybody. And that was that. The other one was building 197 at the Navy Yard. I wasn't there when it happened. I'd worked there a couple of years before. They got 3 of the people I worked with.
Jeez.
out of the 6 that he shot, out of the 6 that he killed. So building 197 was spectacular. It was built at the start of the Second World War for manufacturing small boats. It was a factory building.
Okay.
And they had converted it to office space. And the way they'd managed it, they'd left the cranes in from the shipyard rig. And so they had these massive cranes in these huge atriums that went up 6 stories. The sides, they had windows at the top to kill the noise, but everybody else down, they hadn't bothered to put in anything between the atrium and the office space. So it was just, you could just look out over the atrium and there was nothing but a rail there. And that made it, and my first thought the first day on seeing it was, wow, this is a sniper's paradise. Huh. But it was a really beautiful building. I loved working in it. And then I'm getting texts about this person and that person, and can you make the funeral, and so always interesting. They always made a fuss about how dangerous it was working for the military. And this was and this was where I started to take it seriously. Was these 2 incidents. So.
Yeah. Oh, I just remember the Naval Yard guy. He passed the security checks. They didn't even bother running them or something.
He had a rifle. He had a rifle. It was in a paper bag. When he went through the security check, he set it on top and went through. And the guard didn't catch it and check it. So yeah, no, it's that was an easier building to get into, but yeah, that was still wow.
Yeah.
They emptied that building out. I think they've reopened it now, but they've totally rearranged the insides. But the office space is just too valuable to give up on. So.
Yeah. Well, now with Zoom and all the other stuff, a lot of places aren't going to be keeping their offices, from what I can tell. They're worried that London's commercial real estate is going to drop like a rock because everyone's not working in their offices, and the companies that own those buildings are like, or we're renting those office spaces, like, it's so much cheaper to just have our guys work from home than have them come into this big expensive building that I have to rent out.
And Google has declared home life, homework until next summer, not this summer, but next summer.
Yep.
So,
right.
But the thing I'm going to tell you is you can't do classified work from home.
No. I imagine not.
There are things you can do to kind of do, sensitive work from home, but once you get to secret and top secret, no.
Yeah.
No.
Makes sense.
Not unless you're important enough for them to come put a skiff in your basement or something, and the skiff is a security ball.
The Secretary of State wasn't important enough for that.
Well, no, but the issue is that the only purpose of the Secretary of State is to leak the information, not secure it.
Yeah.
as you know, and she's got a server for that. So
yes, she does.
I want you to know, first day at work, she's got diplomatic security, an entire outfit who works 24/7, securing everything having to do with State Department communications. And so she's got her home server to replace that.
Yep.
You know, and by statute, she's supposed to be using some service that keeps archives for the federal record,
Right.
so that she meets FISA requirements and isn't committing felonies every time she sends an email.
Yep.
But fortunately, you know, it doesn't seem that there's a director of the FBI that's going to actually do a proper investigation, and or a prosecutor who's going to recommend prosecution.
Yeah. Well, was it? And I remember like one of my friends going off, well, but her emails. And I'm like, I read one of those emails. It was her entire itinerary to going to Afghanistan. Like she had sent it off to Sharon Mills there, and it was like her entire, like, this is when we're getting into Afghanistan, this is how many guys are going to be guarding us, this is our scheduled times to be everywhere we are, coming in and out. And I'm like, if that email had ended up in the Taliban's hands, maybe we would never learn about her emails, because she and a whole bunch of her friends would be dead.
If you're the Taliban and you're seeing these emails, you're not going to do anything that might stop the flow of emails.
Right.
You know,
right.
Because your target is G.I. Joe.
Sure.
Not the lady in the pumps, you know.
Anyways, it's been a great time talking to you. I know Don's got to go, and I got to go get my car out of impound. Well, it's not an impound. It's just they were cleaning up the parking lots in my building today, so I had to park it somewhere. And but we'll end on the usual last question. Who would you like to see us interview from the membership?
Well, Roden and Arahant are already fun if you haven't done them already. I haven't gone through.
We have Roden and we have not done Arahant.
Okay. And you just did, let's see.
We just did Susan Quinn.
Yep.
That was the last one? Yeah.
Yep.
Susan Quinn was good. That's one I watched. What about Pseudo Dionysus? Can you drag him in?
Yeah, well, I'll try. And sometimes people, for various reasons, don't want to do it. They're busy, or they have government jobs. I had Missio Crassi from Canada. It was like when I asked him, he's like, sign of the cross. Can't see it on TV. But.
No. Yeah, when I was consulting in for the federal government, no, I wouldn't have done this.
Yeah.
Even with all of this,
I just use a sock puppet, man. I'm just like, that's the way. Be very expressive,
And we had one person, we just Lois Lane, when we interviewed her, we just put a picture of Terry Hatcher up. She was very happy with that one.
Oh, very good. I mean, I'm sure she's lovely, but yeah, Terry Hatcher, especially when she was playing Lois Lane. Wow.
Oh yeah. Okay, well, it's been great talking to you, and I'm going to be putting this up. Hopefully, if it's not by the end of today, it'll be up for tomorrow. So
you've gotten pretty good at this now. So
yep,
excellent.
Okay, thanks for watching, and this has been Land of Confusion. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.